I won't be able to sleep tonight, just like I haven't slept for 35 years. Because what I'm about to tell you is something I should have said decades ago. Something that destroyed my soul. Something that forever changed who I am. My name is Lucia Ferretti. I'm 63 years old. And for 18 years, I worked as a housekeeper in the private residence of Cardinal Gabriele Torriani in Rome. A man everyone called a saint. A man the Vatican considered one of the pillars of the Italian Church. A man who, behind closed doors, was completely different from how he appeared. In 2 years, I saw 7 nuns become pregnant, 7 young women, 7 destroyed lives, and the father was always the same. Cardinal Gabriele Torriani, this is my testimony. This is the truth I've kept hidden for too long. And if you're listening to this now, it means I've finally found the courage to speak. It all started in March 1987. I was 28 years old. I had just arrived in Rome from a small town in Abruzzo. My husband had died in a work accident 6 months earlier, leaving me alone with 2 small children and no way to support them. When the diocese offered me the job as housekeeper in the cardinal's residence, I thought God had sent me an angel. I didn't know he was sending me to a place where I would discover terrible things. The residence was located in Trastevere, in a 17th century palazzo. 3 floors, 20 rooms, an interior garden with a marble fountain and a private chapel. It was magnificent. Too magnificent for a man who had taken a vow of poverty. But Cardinal Gabriele came from a noble family. The Torrianis had been wealthy for generations, and the church turned a blind eye to certain things when money and power were involved. The first day I met him, I was struck by his presence. He was 52 years old, almost 6 feet 3 inches tall, perfectly combed silver hair, penetrating blue eyes, and a smile that made you feel like you were the most important person in the world. He always wore his cardinal's purple cassock, even at home. He said it reminded him of who he was, who he should be. I didn't yet know that cassock hid dark secrets. The first months were quiet. I took care of cleaning, cooking, laundry. There were 2 other people working in the residence. Don Pietro, a young 32-year-old priest who served as the cardinal's personal secretary, and Sister Agnes, a 60-year-old woman who managed the chapel and coordinated visits from nuns at the nearby convent. Because yes, there were always nuns. Young nuns who came to pray in the private chapel, to receive spiritual advice from the cardinal, to study theology under his guidance. Cardinal Gabriele was famous for his commitment to educating young religious women. He had founded a special program for nuns under 30, where he personally taught philosophy, theology, and church history. At first, I thought it was wonderful. Such a powerful man dedicating his time to young nuns. What a saint, I thought. What an example of humility and dedication. I was so stupid, so damn stupid. The first time I noticed something strange was one evening in June. It was about midnight. I was sleeping in my small room on the 3rd floor, the one reserved for staff. A noise woke me up. Footsteps. Muffled laughter. A female voice. And the cardinal's deep voice. I got out of bed, confused. Who could it be at that hour? I opened my room door and looked out into the hallway. Everything was dark, except for a light filtering from under the door of the cardinal's study on the 2nd floor. I went down the stairs silently, my heart beating fast. I shouldn't have. I know. I should have gone back to bed and ignored everything. But curiosity was stronger. I approached the door. There was a small crack in the lock. I looked inside, and what I saw froze my blood. Cardinal Gabriele was sitting at his desk, but he wasn't alone. There was a nun with him. A young nun I recognized immediately. Her name was Sister Margaret. She was 24 years old, had arrived from Naples 6 months earlier to study theology. But she wasn't wearing her habit. She was wearing normal clothes, a red dress, hair loose on her shoulders, no longer covered by the veil, red lipstick on her lips. The cardinal was pouring wine into a crystal glass for her. They were laughing. He touched her hand. He caressed her face. I couldn't believe my eyes. There had to be an explanation. Maybe she was his niece. Maybe she was a family friend. Maybe she wasn't a nun. I had mistaken her for someone else. But then he kissed her, on the lips. Long, passionate, and she kissed him back. I felt vomit rising in my throat. I moved away from the door, trembling. I ran back to my room and locked myself inside. I spent the night awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand what I had seen. The next day at breakfast, the cardinal was as always, smiling, kind, paternal. "Good morning, Lucia," he said. "Did you sleep well?" Yes, Your Eminence, I lied. Good. Today we'll have guests for lunch. Bishop Santini and 2 Monsignors. Prepare something special. Certainly, Your Eminence. I saw Sister Margaret that afternoon. She was wearing her nun's habit again, veil properly arranged, clean face, no makeup, praying in the chapel as if nothing had happened. I was convincing myself I had dreamed it all, that it had been an illusion, that I was just tired and my mind had played tricks on me. But then it happened again, and again, and again. Every week, sometimes twice a week, I saw the same scene, always at night, always in the cardinal's study. And it wasn't always Sister Margaret. There were other nuns, young ones, always young. Sister Cecilia, 23 years old. Sister Beatrice, 26 years old. Sister Rose, barely 22 years old. And it wasn't just in the study. Sometimes I heard them in his bedroom. Sounds that no one should hear coming from a cardinal's room. One night, about 2 months after the first time I had seen them, I heard screams. Not screams of pleasure, screams of pain, of fear. I rushed out of my room. The screams were coming from the cardinal's bedroom. I ran down the stairs and found Sister Agnes, the housekeeper, standing in front of the closed door. "What's happening?" I asked, terrified. She looked at me with an expression I'll never forget. She wasn't surprised. She wasn't shocked. She was just tired, resigned. "Go back to your room, Lucia," she said in a flat voice. "But those screams." I said, "Go back to your room." The screams stopped suddenly. There was silence. Then we heard the cardinal's voice, calm and controlled. "Sister Agnes, I need you in here." Sister Agnes entered the room and closed the door behind her. I stood there, paralyzed, for what seemed like hours. When the door reopened, Sister Agnes came out supporting Sister Beatrice. The young nun was pale, trembling, crying silently. "Take her to the guest room," Sister Agnes ordered me, "and don't ask questions." I took Sister Beatrice by the arm and guided her to the guest room on the first floor. She didn't say anything, just cried. When I put her to bed, I saw she was very ill. "Sister Beatrice, what happened?" I whispered. "Are you sick? Should I call a doctor?" She looked at me with empty, dead eyes. "Don't say anything," she whispered. "Please, don't say anything to anyone." The next day, Sister Beatrice was gone. When I asked Sister Agnes where she was, she told me she had been transferred to another convent, up north. No other details. 2 weeks later, I discovered the truth. By accident. I was cleaning the cardinal's study when I found a document left on the desk. It was a medical certificate. A certificate attesting to a pregnancy. Name: Sister Beatrice Lombardi. 6 weeks. My hands were shaking as I read. Sister Beatrice was expecting a baby. And the cardinal knew. That's why they had transferred her so quickly. That's why she had to disappear. I felt nausea overwhelm me again. I sat in the chair, the document still in my hand. What should I do? Should I say something? Should I call someone? Should I go to the bishop? But who would believe me? I was just a housekeeper, a poor widow with 2 children, and he was a cardinal, a prince of the church. Who would take my word against his? While I sat there, paralyzed by indecision, the study door opened. The cardinal entered. He saw me with the document in my hand. His face changed immediately. "Lucia," he said with a dangerously calm voice, "what are you doing?" I was cleaning. The document was on the desk. He approached slowly. He took the document from my hands. "Did you read this?" I couldn't lie. My face said everything. Yes, but I didn't mean to. I was just... "Sit down," he ordered. I sat. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. The cardinal sat across from me, the document carefully folded in front of him. "Lucia," he began, his voice now soft, almost paternal. "What you've seen, what you've heard these months, I know it has troubled you. I know you're confused, but you must understand something very important." He looked me straight in the eyes. "I am a man of God, but I am also a man, and like all men, I have weaknesses. But these girls, these young nuns, they come to me of their own free will. They seek me out. Your Eminence, Listen to me," he interrupted. Sister Beatrice had problems, emotional problems. She became attached to me inappropriately. I tried to help her, to guide her spiritually, but she misinterpreted my kindness. And now, well, she finds herself in this situation. "But the baby? Is it yours?" The cardinal laughed, a cold laugh, devoid of humor. Who knows, Lucia? These young girls, they come here from all over Italy. Who knows what they do when they're not here? He got up, walked to the window. I spoke with her superior. She'll be transferred to a convent in northern Italy where she'll receive appropriate care. The baby will be placed with a good Catholic family. It's the best solution for everyone. He turned to me. Now, Lucia, you have a choice. You can continue to work here. You can continue to provide for your children. You can keep this well-paid and secure job, or you can do something very stupid. You can talk about things you don't understand. You can make accusations that would destroy not only me, but also all those young nuns you're trying to help. He approached me. He bent down to be at my level. His blue eyes were cold as ice. Do you think anyone will believe you? Do you think a housekeeper's word is worth more than a cardinal's? And even if someone listened to you, what do you think would happen? I have powerful friends, very powerful. I can make sure you lose this job. I can make sure no one in all of Rome ever hires you again. I can make sure social services take an interest in your family's situation. 2 small children with a mother who can't provide for them. You know what happens in these cases, right? Tears were streaming down my face. So, Lucia, what do you choose? Silence and security, or very serious consequences? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My voice had died in my throat. Good girl, he said, smiling. I knew you'd make the right choice. And so I remained silent. I remained silent because I was afraid, because I needed that job, because I had 2 children who depended on me. I remained silent and became an accomplice. But things continued, much worse. In the next 2 years, I saw the same story repeat 7 times. 7 young nuns, 7 pregnancies, 7 silent disappearances. Sister Beatrice was just the first. Then came Sister Margaret, then Sister Cecilia, then Sister Rose, then Sister Teresa, then Sister Anna, then Sister Frances, all young, all beautiful, all with great hopes and dreams of serving God, and all irreversibly damaged by Cardinal Gabriele Torriani. His method was always the same. He chose them when they arrived for the study program. He attracted them with special attention, private lessons, compliments. He invited them to dinner at the residence. He made them feel special, chosen, important. Then he began to touch them, first subtly, a hand on the shoulder, a paternal hug, then bolder. Caresses on the hair, kisses on the forehead. And when they began to doubt, to feel uncomfortable, he played the manipulation card. He told them it was God's will, that their bond was pure and holy, that the rules of the church didn't apply to them because their connection was special, divine. He said Saint Teresa of Avila had similar mystical experiences, that love for God could manifest in many ways. And these poor girls, young and naive, raised in religious families where men of the church were considered infallible, believed him. Or at least, wanted to believe him. Because the alternative was to admit they were being manipulated by a cardinal. And that truth was too painful to face. But when they became pregnant, the cardinal changed completely. The kind and loving man disappeared. In his place was someone cold, calculating, ruthless. He accused them of seeking him out. He said they had tempted him, that it was their responsibility. He threatened to expose their behavior if they spoke. And then he made them disappear. With the help of Sister Agnes and a network of collaborators in the church, the nuns were transferred to remote convents, some in the mountains, others on small islands, places where no one would ask questions. The babies were placed immediately after birth. The mothers were forced to sign documents giving up all rights, and if they refused, they were threatened with being declared problematic and permanently expelled. I saw all this. I lived in that house of horrors, and I continued to remain silent. One night, about 1.5 years after the episode with Sister Beatrice, I couldn't bear it anymore. It had happened again. Sister Anna, a sweet 23-year-old girl from Sicily, was expecting a baby. I had heard her crying in the guest room. I had seen her being taken away the next morning, pale and trembling. That evening, when the cardinal was out for an event at the Vatican, I went to the study. I knew he kept documents hidden in a safe behind a painting. I had seen him open it several times. I knew the combination. I opened the safe. Inside were piles of documents, medical certificates, birth certificates, placement documents, and letters, dozens of letters written by the nuns, desperate pleas to the cardinal to acknowledge his children, to take responsibility, to help them. He hadn't responded to any of them. There was also a diary. a small black diary with his elegant handwriting. I opened it with trembling hands. What I read made me feel very sick. It was all there. Every encounter, every manipulation, every pregnancy, written as if it were a conquest to be proud of. He described the girls in inappropriate detail, evaluated their behavior, commented on which was the most difficult to convince, which the most passionate, which the most docile. And at the end of each section, there was always the same phrase: God forgives me because I am his instrument. I saved them from ignorance and brought them closer to divinity through me. This man was sick and dangerous, and I could no longer remain silent. I took the diary. I took some of the documents. I put them in a bag and hid them in my room. The next day, I went to Bishop Santini. He was the cardinal's direct superior, an elderly man, 72 years old, whom I knew because he often came to lunch at the residence. He let me into his office at the Vatican. I was terrified, but determined. Your Excellency, I began with a trembling voice, I must tell you something very serious. Something concerning Cardinal Torriani. The bishop smiled kindly. Of course, my daughter. What is it? I told him everything, every detail, every nun, every pregnancy, every disappearance. I pulled out the documents. I showed him the diary. The bishop looked at them in silence. His face was expressionless. When I finished speaking, there was a long silence. Lucia, he finally said, I understand that what you're telling me is very serious, and I appreciate your courage in coming here. He got up, walked to the window overlooking St. Peter's Square. But you must understand these are very serious accusations against one of the Church's most respected cardinals. Cardinal Torriani has dedicated his life to serving God. He has done so much good. He has helped thousands of people. He turned to me. These young nuns, they're human. They have weaknesses. Sometimes they develop inappropriate attachments to authority figures. It's happened before. It will happen again. But we can't allow these situations to damage the reputation of devout men. Your Excellency, I said with a broken voice, I've shown you the evidence, the diary, the documents, 7 nuns, 7 children. This isn't a simple inappropriate attachment. This is systematic manipulation. The bishop returned to his desk. He took the diary and documents. These are very grave accusations, he repeated. They will require thorough evaluation, internal, of course. The Church handles its affairs internally. He looked at me with a smile I now recognize as fake. In the meantime, Lucia, I advise you not to speak of this with anyone, for the good of all people involved. Understood? But have you understood? Yes, Your Excellency. Good. Now go. I will pray for you. I returned to the residence with a heavy heart. I knew nothing would happen. I knew they had deceived me again. And indeed, nothing happened. No evaluation. No consequences. The cardinal continued his life as if nothing had occurred. But I was no longer the same. Something had died inside me. The faith I had, the trust in the Church, everything was lost. 2 weeks after my visit to the bishop, something happened that pushed me beyond every limit. It was a Sunday morning. I was preparing breakfast when I heard a commotion outside. I ran to the window and saw an ambulance. Paramedics running toward the back garden. I rushed outside. In the garden, next to the fountain, there was a body. The body of a young woman, floating in the water, face turned toward the sky, eyes open. It was Sister Rose, the last nun the cardinal had impregnated. She had been transferred 6 weeks earlier. She had returned, and she had chosen to leave forever in the residence garden. The paramedics pulled her out of the water. It was too late. There was nothing more to be done. In her hand was a sheet of paper, a letter. The police took it, but I managed to read the first lines before they took it away. I can no longer live with this secret. I can no longer live with this pain. He destroyed me. Cardinal Gabriele Torriani destroyed me. And no one believes me. No one helps me. So I choose the only way out left to me. The police came. They asked questions. The cardinal said she was a nun with problems who had developed an obsession with him. He said he had helped her as much as possible, but unfortunately it hadn't been enough. Bishop Santini released a statement. A tragedy. A tormented young woman who succumbed to despair. We pray for her. The matter was closed. No thorough investigation, no uncomfortable questions. The letter disappeared. Sister Rose's family was never fully informed, and I understood. I understood that no matter how much evidence I had, no matter how many women were damaged, the church would always protect its own. Always. That night, I made a decision. I would leave. I would leave that job, that cursed house, that man in a red cassock, even if it meant economic difficulties, even if it meant struggling to survive. I could no longer stay. But before leaving, I did one thing. I took the diary. I took it from the cardinal's safe. I hid it in the lining of my coat. And when I left the residence the next day, I took with me the only tangible proof of Cardinal Gabriele Torriani's behavior. I tried to make the story public. I went to journalists. No one wanted to listen to me. Too risky, they said. Too powerful, the cardinal. Too dangerous. I tried to go to the authorities. They told me that without witnesses willing to speak, without victims who would confirm, there was nothing they could do. And all the nuns had disappeared, transferred far away, silent, frightened. So in the end, I did the only thing I could do. I hid the diary in a safe place and waited. Waited for the right moment to arrive. Cardinal Gabriele Torriani died in 2018. He was 83 years old. The funeral was celebrated in St. Peter's. The Pope himself spoke of his service to the church. Thousands of people came to pay tribute. He was buried in the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore, an honor reserved only for the greatest prelates. I didn't go to the funeral. I couldn't. The anger I felt was too strong. But now, 5 years after his death, I've decided it's time. Time to tell the truth. Time to give voice to those 7 young women who were damaged by that man. I tracked down some of them. It wasn't easy. The church had hidden them well, but with patience, with determination, I found them. Sister Beatrice lives in a small town in the Alps. She's 56 years old now. She never fully recovered. She lives alone, works as a teacher, has had no more contact with the church since that day. The baby was placed with a family in Germany. She never knew him. When I found her and told her I wanted to make the story public, she burst into tears. For 35 years, I believed I was the only one, she told me. I believed it was me who provoked him. I believed it was my responsibility. When I told her there were 7, that there was a diary where he documented everything, that he was a serial manipulator, something broke in her. She cried for hours, but then she told me, "Thank you. Thank you for not leaving me alone with this weight." Sister Margaret didn't survive. She took her own life 10 years ago. Too much pain, too much shame, too many years of forced silence. Sister Cecilia lives in Spain. She got married, has 2 children, rebuilt a life. But she told me, not a day goes by without me thinking about that period. Not a day goes by without me wondering what could have been if he hadn't damaged me. Sister Anna, Sister Teresa, Sister Francis, similar stories, ruined lives, shattered dreams, traumas that will never heal, and the children, 7 children scattered across Europe, placed with families who will never know who their father really was, who will never know the truth about the circumstances of their birth. Today, 35 years later, I finally speak. I finally break the silence. The diary still exists. It's safe, with a lawyer, with precise instructions on what to do if something should happen to me. They can no longer stop me. They can no longer silence the truth. I know there will be consequences. I know the church will try to discredit me. They'll say I'm a bitter old woman. They'll say I'm making up stories. They'll say I'm seeking attention or money, but I have the evidence. I have the diary. I have the documents I kept. And most importantly, I have the testimonies of some of the survivors who now finally have found the courage to speak with me. I'm not doing this for revenge. The cardinal is dead. I can no longer hurt him. I'm doing it for those 7 women, to give them the justice they were denied, to tell the world they weren't problematic. They weren't seeking him out. They were victims of a manipulator who wore a red cassock. And I'm doing it for all the other victims out there. For all the women, men, people who have been damaged by authority figures in the church and who never spoke because they were afraid of not being believed. I believe you. The world must believe you. 7 nuns pregnant in 2 years. This is Cardinal Gabriele Torriani's secret, but I must tell you something even more terrible, something I discovered only recently. Something that demonstrates how deep the corruption was. 6 months ago, while doing research to track down the survivors, I received a phone call, an unknown number, an elderly woman's voice trembling. "Are you Lucia Ferretti?" she asked. "Yes, who's speaking? My name is Adriana. I was Sister Adriana. Before you, much before you. I didn't understand at first. Before me? I worked for Cardinal Torriani in the 70s. I was the housekeeper before you. My heart stopped. I read that you're trying to gather testimonies, she continued. I read that you want to tell the truth, and I must tell you something that perhaps explains everything. We met a week later in a small cafe in Florence. Adriana was 84 years old. She was fragile, tiny, with hands that trembled as she held her coffee cup. I worked for him from 1972 to 1978, she began. 6 years. And in those years, I saw the same thing you saw: young nuns, pregnancies, disappearances. How many? I asked with a broken voice. At least 10, maybe more. I didn't keep count. I couldn't. It was too painful. My God, I whispered. 10 plus 7 makes 17. 17 women in total. But there's worse, Adriana said. I went to the bishop, just like you did. I brought evidence. I begged them to do something. And you know what they told me? I shook my head. They told me they already knew that Cardinal Torriani had certain problematic behaviors for years, but that he was too important, too powerful, too well connected to be touched. They gave me money, lots of money, and they made me sign a confidentiality agreement. They threatened me that if I spoke, I would be in serious trouble. Tears were streaming down her face. I took the money. I had 4 children. I was a widow. I took the money and remained silent. And I've hated myself every day since. She took my hand. But you, Lucia, you can do what I didn't have the courage to do. You can tell the truth, even if it's late, even if he's dead. The victims deserve to know they weren't alone, that it wasn't their responsibility. Adriana passed away 3 months after our meeting, a serious illness. But before leaving, she gave me something. A box. Inside were letters. Letters from some of the nuns from the 70s. Desperate letters, cries for help that no one had ever answered. I added those letters to my collection of evidence. And I continued searching. I spoke with former priests, former nuns, former Vatican employees. And slowly, very slowly, an even more serious picture emerged. Cardinal Gabriele Torriani was not an isolated case. He was part of a system that systematically protected certain behaviors, that moved problems from one place to another, that silenced victims with money and threats. I discovered that when a nun became pregnant, there was a standard procedure. She was immediately transferred to a remote convent, managed by a specific order of elderly nuns who were, essentially, stern guardians. The young women were kept there until birth, isolated from the outside world, with no possibility of communicating with their families. After birth, the babies were taken away immediately. The mothers couldn't even hold them. Some were placed for adoption, others ended up in orphanages run by the church. And some, I discovered with horror, simply disappeared from the records. No birth certificate, no documents, as if they had never existed. I spoke with a woman who worked in one of these remote convents in the 80s. She told me about rooms where girls suffered during childbirth without adequate medical assistance. She told me about babies who didn't survive because the mothers didn't receive appropriate care. She told me about young women who lost their minds from pain and were sedated with heavy drugs. It was terrible, she told me. Terrible, and no one talked about it. When I returned home that evening, I cried for hours. I cried for all those women. I cried for all those children. I cried for my complicity, for the years I had remained silent. But then I dried my tears and continued, because someone had to speak. Someone had to be the voice of those who could no longer speak. I contacted investigative journalists. This time, some listened to me. The climate had changed. After the scandals that had emerged all over the world, people were more willing to believe, more willing to ask difficult questions. A journalist from a major Italian newspaper agreed to investigate. I gave him all the evidence: the diary, the letters, the documents, the names of the survivors who were willing to speak. It took months. Cross-checks, confirmations, archive research. But in the end, the story was ready to be published. 2 weeks before publication, I received a visit. 2 men in suits. They said they were lawyers for the diocese. Mrs. Ferretti, one of them began, "We are aware of your intentions to publish certain claims against the late Cardinal Torriani." "They're not claims," I replied. "They're documented facts. The diocese is willing to offer you an advantageous settlement," he continued, ignoring my objection. "A substantial sum in exchange for your silence and the delivery of all documents in your possession. I'm not for sale." The other lawyer spoke for the first time. His voice was cold. "Mrs. Ferretti, you are 63 years old. You have grandchildren. It would be unfortunate if your reputation were compromised, if you were seen as a bitter person making up stories for money. It would be unfortunate if your grandchildren had to grow up with a grandmother known in a negative way." He was threatening me, openly. "Out of my house," I said with a firm voice. "Now." "Think carefully," he said as he left. "Think very carefully." That night I didn't sleep. I was afraid. Afraid for myself, afraid for my family. But then I thought of Sister Rose in the fountain. I thought of Sister Margaret, who hadn't made it. I thought of all those women whose names I didn't even know, and I understood I couldn't stop, no matter the price. The article was published 3 weeks ago. Front page. Headline: The Cardinal's Secret. 17 nuns, 17 pregnancies, 50 years of behavior hidden by the Church. The reaction was immediate and intense. The diocese published a statement defining everything as defamation against a dead man who cannot defend himself. They said I was a disgruntled employee with personal problems. But then other voices began to be heard. Other victims, not just of Cardinal Torriani, of other priests, other bishops, other cardinals, women who had been silent for decades, who now found the courage to speak. A movement. That's what we started. A movement of truth that the Church can no longer stop. Of course, there have been attacks. I've been harshly criticized. I've received protest letters, threats, someone threw stones at my windows. But I've also received hundreds of letters of support from victims, from family members of victims, from ordinary people telling me, "Thank you for having the courage to speak." Sister Beatrice called me after the article was published. "Lucia," she said, her voice full of emotion. "For the first time in 35 years, I feel that maybe I can begin to heal, because now the world knows. Now it's no longer just my burden to carry." Sister Cecilia wrote to me from Spain. "I'm telling my husband and children the truth. The whole truth. For too long I've lived with shame. But the shame wasn't mine. It was his. The Cardinal's. The Church that protected him." These words give me the strength to continue, because I know we did the right thing. The Church has announced an internal evaluation. They say they'll take the claims seriously, that they'll verify everything. I'm skeptical. Too often these internal evaluations end without concrete results. But at least it's a start. Some progressive bishops have publicly apologized. They've admitted the Church failed, that it protected wrong behavior instead of protecting victims, that it must change radically. I don't know if they'll really change. I don't know if justice will ever be fully done. Cardinal Gabriele Torriani is dead. He can no longer be judged, but his name is now stained. His legacy is compromised, and maybe that's something. Today, as I record this testimony, I have the Cardinal's diary in front of me, that small black book full of horrors. I'm donating it to a public archive. It will be available to researchers, journalists, anyone who wants to see the truth. I want future theology students to read it. I want them to see what happens when power has no control, when people believe themselves above human rules because they serve God. I want young women entering convents to know how to recognize the signs, to know that no one, no matter how saintly they seem, has the right to take advantage of them, to know that manipulation is wrong, even if presented with words of theology and spirituality. And I want victims to know they're not alone, that it's never too late to speak, that their voice has value, even if it took decades to find it. I'm 63 years old. I don't know how much time I have left, but I'll use every day I have to continue fighting, to continue giving voice to those who don't have one. Because 7 nuns pregnant in 2 years isn't just a statistic. It's 7 lives. 7 women with names, dreams, hopes. 7 women who deserved much better than what they received. Sister Beatrice dreamed of becoming a missionary in Africa. That dream was taken from her. Sister Margaret wanted to teach poor children. That dream left with her. Sister Cecilia loved music. She could have been a great organist. Instead, she lives far away, distant from the Church she once loved. Sister Rose was a poet. She wrote beautiful verses about God and divine love. The last thing she wrote was a farewell letter. Sister Teresa, Sister Anna, Sister Francis, each had a story. Each had a future that was torn away from them. And the 17 children. What will become of them? Some are now adults, 40, 50 years old. They live their lives without knowing the truth about their origins. Do they have the right to know, or is it better to leave them without this knowledge? I don't have answers to these questions. All I know is that silence has done too much damage. Silence allowed the cardinal to continue for 50 years. Silence condemned dozens of women to a life of shame and pain. So I speak. I speak loud and clear. I speak even if it costs me everything. I speak because it's the only right thing to do. Cardinal Gabriele Torriani was a manipulator. He used his position, his power, his religious authority to control vulnerable young women. And the church knew. The church protected him. The church is complicit. This is the truth. This is my testimony. This is the story I had to tell. To all the victims out there, to all the people carrying secrets as heavy as stones in their hearts, I say this. You are not alone. I see you. I believe you. And when you're ready to speak, I'll be here to listen. Because in the end, truth is the only thing that will set us free. Not the church's truth. Not the truth of the powerful, but the truth of the victims. The truth of those who suffered. The truth of those who survived. 7 nuns pregnant in 2 years. This is the secret I saw. This is the horror I witnessed. And this is why, after 35 years, I finally found the courage to say, enough. Enough with secrets. Enough with silence. Enough with protecting those who do harm. It's time for truth. It's time for justice. It's time for healing. I am Lucia Ferretti. I worked in Cardinal Gabriele Torriani's residence for 18 years. And I saw everything. Now the whole world knows. And nothing will ever be the same again.